war had been lost long before the farmer even heard about it. In the stars above, the human fleets had fallen one by one. The great commanders were gone, their mighty ships shattered. What remained of humanity was silence, sorrow, and ashes. The alien empire had declared victory, and they celebrated with cruel pride. On Earth, far from the burning front lines, a farmer named Eli worked his small piece of land. He was not a soldier, not a leader, not a man of weapons. He was just a quiet soul who loved his soil, his crops, and the sound of the wind through the fields. When the war had started, he had believed others would fight, the trained men and women, the generals and their fleets. Yet as months passed, news grew darker. One by one, planets were falling, stations went silent, and hope died. Eli listened to broken transmissions on an old radio set. Static filled most of the night, but sometimes a voice would break through. A captain crying for help, a soldier screaming as his ship burned, a child whispering a final goodbye before silence claimed the signal. Eli's heart ached, yet what could a farmer do against an empire that had conquered the stars? One evening, he heard words that made his hands freeze. The war is over. Humanity is finished. The alien council controls everything. The message came again and again, repeated like a cruel echo. Villages near Eli's farm began to prepare for surrender. They would bow their heads and accept alien rule. People whispered that resistance was foolish. Survival was the only choice. But Eli's eyes did not lower. He looked at his old wrench lying on the wooden table. It was nothing more than a tool, used to fix tractors, repair engines, tighten bolts. But in that moment it felt heavy, like a question, like a challenge. What if one man refused to accept defeat? The battlefield was not far from the farm. Wreckage had fallen. And from the sky, human and alien machines both. Eli walked among the ruins the next morning, his boots sinking into mud soaked with ash. He saw broken cannons, shattered steel, burned ships half buried in the earth. No soldier remained to fight, only silence. But silence did not scare him. He knelt beside a ruined machine, its surface blackened with smoke. With steady hands, he touched the broken parts, gears bent and circuits torn. Yet something inside the wreck hummed, faint, almost forgotten. A machine was sleeping here, waiting for hands that cared. Eli pulled the wrench from his belt. He had fixed harvesters. He had repaired plows. He had rebuilt tractors older than himself. He did not know the codes of war, but he knew the language of steel and bolts. Slowly, carefully, he began to work, turning the wrench, loosening the bolts, reconnecting wires with farmers' patience. Every sound of metal shifting felt alive, like the machine was breathing again. The air grew tense, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Birds stopped singing. Even the wind went quiet, and then sparks leapt from the broken machine. Lights flickered, engines coughed, gears ground against one another. Eli wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes sharp, his hands steady. He did not stop. Villagers who had followed him stood at a distance. They whispered, some laughed, some shook their heads. What could a farmer do? What madness was this? But their laughter slowly turned to silence as the machine began to rise, its massive frame towering above them, metal shining despite the scars of battle. A human war mech, long abandoned, stood once more. Eli stepped back, wrench still in hand. His chest rose and fell, his face calm. He looked at the mech as though it were an old friend. The villagers could only stare, their fear and hopelessness breaking just a little. If a farmer could wake a giant, meh. Maybe humanity was not finished. Above them, alien patrol ships circled. They had seen the machine's power surge. They laughed at first, mocking the foolish humans clinging to broken dreams, but something about the farmer's calm expression made them uneasy. This was no trained soldier, no famous general. This was an ordinary man, and yet he had done what armies could not. As night fell, Eli sat beneath the shadow of the mech. He held the wrench across his lap. His mind was quiet, but his heart burned with a fire he had never known. Tomorrow the aliens would come. Tomorrow they would test his strength. But for now, he whispered into the silent air, the battle is not over. Not yet. Eli did not sleep that night. He sat with the mech towering above him, the stars burning cold in the sky. In his hands the wrench felt heavier than ever before. Not because of its weight, but because of the choice it carried. He was only a farmer, but now the war had placed its shadow on his shoulders. When the morning came, smoke rose in the distance. Alien patrol ships swept across the horizon, searching, scanning, hunting. They knew a human machine had stirred again. They wanted to crush the hope before it could spread. Villagers begged Eli to hide. They pleaded that resistance would only bring death, but Eli's eyes did not turn away. He had seen too much silence, too much surrender, and he would not add his voice to that silence. With slow, steady steps, he climbed the mech, its surface still scarred, its joints groaning like an old beast awakening from sleep. The hatch opened with a hiss, and for the first time in his life, Eli entered a cockpit built for war. The controls were strange, rows of switches, glowing panels, cracked screens. Yet somehow they did not frighten him. They reminded him of tractors he had repaired, harvesters he had rebuilt. Machines had a rhythm, and Eli knew how to listen. As he sat down, the mech hummed to life. Lights blinked, power surged, and the giant frame shifted its weight. From a distance, human survivors gasped, their voices filled with awe and disbelief. For the first time in months, the sound of human steel moving echoed across the ruined valley. The aliens circling above did not laugh now. Their scanners confirmed the impossible. A human war machine stood ready. Eli gripped the controls. His hands shook at first, but then steadied as the mech responded. Metal feet pressed into the ground. Dust rose with every step. The machine moved clumsy, heavy, but alive. Alien drones swooped down, their weapons glowing with energy. The first blast struck the earth near Eli, shaking the cockpit. Villagers screamed, but Eli only leaned forward, determination burning in his eyes. With one swift pull of a lever, the mech raised its arm. An old cannon mounted on its shoulder sparked to life. The weapon coughed smoke and fire, the shot tearing through the sky. An alien drone exploded into shards of burning metal. The people below gasped, hope igniting in their hearts. A farmer had fired the first shot of a new resistance, but the battle was far from over. More drones descended, sharp and swift, circling like predators. Eli's mech staggered under fire, armor plates groaning, glass cracking. Inside the cockpit, alarms screamed, red lights flashing across the panels. Any soldier would have panicked, but Eli did not. He thought of broken tractors in heavy rain. He thought of rusted engines in the dark. Machines always fought back when you tried to wake them. You had to be patient. You had to push through. He pressed buttons, pulled levers, twisted handles, each movement clumsy at first, then sharper, faster. Soon the mech responded like a beast recognizing its rider. It raised its fists, smashing through two drones that came too close, the sky lit with sparks, smoke, and burning fire. Aliens watching from their ships grew restless. How could a farmer move a machine like this? They had studied human generals, destroyed their fleets, crushed their armies, but they had not prepared for this. An ordinary man who refused to bow. The villagers below began to shout his name. Their fear turned into something else. Their hands clenched into fists. Their voices rose louder. They saw with their own eyes that the enemy could bleed, and that one man, a farmer with a wrench, could stand against the empire. Eli's mech staggered again, heavy smoke rising from its chest, but he did not retreat. Instead, he pushed the machine forward, step by step, into the heart of the war zone, toward the wrecks of other fallen mechs. His mind whispered a thought both dangerous and powerful. If one machine could rise again, why not more? The aliens poured more fire from the sky, yet Eli pressed on. The wrench tied to his belt clinking with every shake. He remembered the soil of his farm, the weight of seeds in his hands. Life was always about planting, waiting, and fighting through storms, and maybe this war was just another storm, and he was ready to face it. As night fell once more, the valley burned. The farmer stood inside the battered mech, smoke and fire painting the sky red. He looked at the broken machines scattered across the field. His chest rose with a quiet promise. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. The night was heavy with smoke and ash. Eli sat inside the cockpit, his hands still gripping the controls. The mech stood tall but wounded, its chest cracked, its armor burned. Yet deep inside the machine something pulsed, like a heart slowly remembering how to beat. Eli closed his eyes for a moment, listening, not to alarms, not to explosions, but to the rhythm of steel. He pressed a lever gently. The mech shivered. He turned a dial. Lights blinked back to life. The sound grew stronger, steady, almost alive. It was no longer just a broken weapon. It was something breathing, something waiting. The villagers below stared in silence, afraid to believe what their eyes were seeing. The aliens above grew restless. Drones circled, searching for a weak point. Commanders mocked through their radios, calling the farmer foolish. They said one machine could never change fate. But deep inside, unease stirred, because they saw what humans themselves had not seen. The mech was no longer just steel, it was awake. Eli's wrench dangled from his belt, cold against his leg. He remembered long days in the fields when old tractors would stall. Machines always spoke in whispers. If you listened carefully, you could hear where they hurt. He whispered back now, not with words but with his hands on the controls, and the mech listened. Suddenly the cockpit shook, a surge of power rushing through the panels. Screens flickered. Targeting systems came online. A low hum spread across the valley, deep and powerful. The villagers gasped as the mech's eyes blazed with white light. A roar thundered through the ground, shaking dust into the air. The machine was alive. Alien drones dove fast, beams of fire raining down. Eli pulled the controls. The mech raised its arm. A shield plate extended, sparks bursting as enemy blasts struck. Metal groaned, glass cracked. But the farmer did not flinch. He pushed forward, and the mech responded with fury. The cannon fired again, brighter, louder, sharper than before. One drone burst into flames. Another split apart midair. Villagers shouted, their voices trembling with hope. For the first time they saw not defeat but resistance, and that resistance stood on the shoulders of a farmer. But Eli did not stop with one machine. As smoke cleared, he looked across the battlefield. Broken mechs lay scattered like fallen giants, silent, forgotten. His mind sparked with a dangerous thought. If he could wake this one, maybe he could wake more. The aliens realized too late what was happening. They had crushed armies, destroyed fleets, but now their victory slipped through their fingers because hope had returned, and hope in human hands was more dangerous than any weapon. Eli guided the mech toward another wreck. Metal screamed as he forced the giant body closer. Bullets rained from above. The ground shook with fire, but he pressed forward, his wrench in hand. He climbed out under burning skies and slammed the wrench against broken steel. The sound echoed, a hammer strike in the heart of despair. Villagers rushed to help. Men, women, even children. Their hands carried tools, wires, scrap parts. They worked beside Eli, guided by his courage. Together they pulled open panels, fixed circuits, replaced gears. And as the night deepened, another mech's eyes flickered, then another. Aliens roared in anger, their mothership sending waves of reinforcements. But with each blast of enemy fire, another human mech stirred, giants rising one by one, shaking the earth with their steps. A farmer had awakened the battlefield, and the dead were no longer silent. Eli climbed back into his machine. Sweat poured down his face. His arms trembled, but his eyes burned with a light stronger than fire. He raised the mech's arm high, pointing toward the alien ships. The villagers below cheered, their voices like thunder rolling across the ruins. This was no longer just a fight, this was a rebirth. As dawn broke, the battlefield looked different. Where there had been only wrecks and silence, now stood a line of mechs, scarred, broken, but alive. Eli knew the war was not won, but he also knew something greater. The war was not lost either. The machine had awakened, and so had humanity. The sun rose over a valley of broken steel. Alien ships hovered in the sky like vultures waiting for the kill. The smoke of last night still clung to the earth, thick and bitter, but among the ruins stood giants. Human mechs once silent, now awake. Their eyes glowed with white fire, their frames trembling with new life. Eli stood inside his cockpit, gripping the controls tightly. His heart beat heavy, but his gaze never wavered. Below him, villagers stared in awe. They had thought one mech was a miracle, but now they saw 3, then 5, then more. Each one scarred, rusted, patched with farmers' tools, yet each one alive. Alien commanders screamed orders through their channels. Drones swarmed, engines roared, weapons hummed with deadly heat. They had mocked this farmer, but now they feared him. The first clash was no longer a question. It was coming, and Eli knew he would not run. The drones dived, sharp and fast, blades of energy cutting the sky. Eli pulled the controls. His mech stepped forward. Its cannon roared, tearing the air apart. A drone exploded, raining fire across the battlefield. 2 more circled, their beams slashing into the mech's armor. The cockpit rattled. Alarms screamed. Eli gritted his teeth and pushed harder. Nearby, another mech stumbled, its legs still broken. smoke rising from its chest. Eli shouted across the comms, "Hold steady, keep fighting." A villager inside that mech. A young mechanic gripped her controls. Though fear shook her hands, she fired back. Her shot struck true, slicing a drone in half. Cheers rose from the ground, the sound louder than the engines. The battle spread like wildfire, giants of steel clashing with swarms of alien machines. Every explosion shook the valley. The earth itself seemed to roar. The villagers who had once bowed their heads now shouted with pride. Their voices rose like a storm, and the storm gave strength to the mechs. Eli moved his machine with strange instinct. He swung its arm wide, smashing a drone out of the air. He ducked low, shielding another mech with his own bulk. Blasts tore through his armor. Sparks lit the cockpit, but he kept moving. He was a farmer, and farmers did not abandon their fields. This battlefield was now his field, and he would not leave it to ruin. Alien ships opened fire from above. Scythe beams of light cut into the earth. Trenches burst. Soil flew high. Villagers scattered for cover. Eli's mech staggered under the assault, yet still he advanced. Step by step through smoke and fire, his cannon roared again, ripping through the enemy lines. The aliens began to realize the truth. They had fought soldiers. They had crushed fleets, but they had never fought men and women who had nothing left to lose and nothing more to fear. The farmer's courage spread like fire. Every villager who saw him believed again, and belief was something the alien empire could not control. Eli's wrench swung at his side, clinking against the cockpit frame, a reminder that he was not a warrior born. He was a man who fixed broken things, and now he was fixing the broken spirit of humanity. The first clash reached its peak. Flames towered into the sky. Metal screamed. Explosions thundered. Drones fell one after another, torn by cannon fire and steel fists. But humans too paid the price. 2 mechs fell, smoke rising from their shattered cores. Villagers wept, shouting their names into the chaos. Eli's chest tightened, rage filling his blood. He charged forward. His mech slammed into a swarm of drones, crushing 3 beneath its weight. He lifted the arm and fired point blank into a 4th. The blast lit the valley like a second sun. Alien commanders fell silent for a moment. Their scanners could not understand how this battle was turning. But Eli understood. It was not the machines. It was the people inside them. As the dust settled for a brief moment, Eli stood tall in the cockpit, sweat dripping, lungs burning. His mech trembled, armor cracked, wires sparking. Yet it stood, and that was enough. Across the valley, villagers raised their fists and cried out, "The farmer fights! We fight too!" The first clash was not the end. It was only the beginning of something greater, and in that moment even the stars seemed to listen, because for the first time in a long time, humanity had struck back. The battlefield lay smoking after the first clash. Shreks of drones burned in heaps, sparks lit the sky like dying stars. Human mechs stood tall but battered, armor cracked, weapons overheated, pilots exhausted. The villagers below looked up with wide eyes, their fear now replaced with something they had forgotten: hope. Eli sat inside his cockpit, breathing hard. His mech groaned under its own weight, wires sparking around him. Yet his eyes stayed sharp, his hands steady on the controls. He had seen battles fought by machines, but this was not just about machines. It was about people, and people could not be broken so easily. When night fell, the survivors gathered: villagers, old mechanics, children who carried scrap metal, soldiers who had thrown away their guns. They all looked at Eli. They did not call him commander. They did not call him general, but their eyes waited for his voice, and he gave it. "We cannot fight the aliens as they expect," he said. "We cannot match their fleets or their numbers, but we have something they do not. We fix, we rebuild, we endure. Every wreck on this ground is not dead. It is waiting. We will bring them back, one by one." His words struck like fire. Villagers nodded. Mechanics ran to gather tools. Children carried wires. Women pulled panels. Men dragged broken steel. The valley that had been filled with silence now rang with hammers, sparks, and voices. Under the broken sky, humanity began to rebuild itself. Eli's strategy was not written in books. It came from years of farming, years of fixing what was broken. He taught them that every part had a purpose, every scrap had value. He showed them how to strip alien wrecks, how to patch holes, how to connect circuits. 1 mech became 2, 2 became 4, and soon a line of giants rose from the ashes. Alien commanders watched with growing rage. Their scans showed impossible numbers, machines that had been counted as destroyed. Moving again, an army of farmers, villagers, and broken soldiers now stood where none should have. They tightened their patrols, they sent more drones. But each day the humans grew stronger. Eli moved among them, not as a commander above, but as one of them. His wrench never left his side. He worked in the dirt, his hands black with grease, his voice calm and steady. When a machine refused to start, he leaned close, listening, fixing, guiding. Others copied him, and soon everyone worked like him, not warriors but builders of hope. Each night the aliens struck, and each night they were pushed back. Human mechs clumsy at first, then faster, sharper. Pilots learned through failure, through fire, through pain, and every mistake became a lesson. Every loss became fuel for vengeance. Eli's strategy was simple, but it spread like wildfire. The more they repaired, the more they believed, and belief was heavier than any cannon. Yet Eli knew the aliens would not wait forever. He knew their true power had not yet descended. Rumors came of a mothership moving closer, a monster in the sky with weapons that could erase cities. Villagers whispered in fear, but Eli only looked at his wrench and said quietly, "Then we will fix that too." The suspense grew heavy. Each day was a race against time. Build faster, train harder, prepare for the storm. The villagers who had once thought surrender was the only way now moved with fire in their eyes. Children painted the mechs with symbols. Old men prayed at their feet. Mothers placed ribbons on the machines as if blessing their own sons. And every hand, every voice, every tear built toward what was coming. The farmer's strategy was not about winning quickly. It was about refusing to lose. It was about teaching the galaxy that humans were not finished. That even if you burned their armies, crushed their cities, and silenced their leaders, a single man with a wrench could still rise, and when one rose, others would follow. The aliens tried to laugh again, but their voices trembled. Their reports spoke of something they had never faced. Not soldiers, not fleets, not weapons of mass destruction, but ordinary people who refused to break and led by a farmer who knew only how to fix. Eli stood one night on the mech's shoulder, looking at the stars. He could see the faint glow of the mothership on the horizon, a storm waiting to fall. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. "Let them come. We are ready." The sky was no longer dark with smoke. It was burning with light. The alien mothership had arrived. Its shadow stretched across the valley, swallowing villages, rivers, and even mountains. The earth trembled beneath its weight. Its weapons glowed like suns ready to fall. Villagers looked up and felt their hearts freeze. This was not a patrol, not a squad of drones. This was the Empire itself, a beast that had crushed entire worlds without slowing. People whispered that no one could stand against such a monster. But then their eyes turned to the farmer. Eli stood on the shoulder of his mech, his face covered with dust, his hands scarred from endless work. The wrench still hung from his belt. He looked small compared to the steel giant beside him, and smaller still against the burning ship above. Yet his gaze was steady. He had seen storms before, and this was just another storm. He spoke to the villagers, his voice calm but fierce. "They want us to kneel. They want us to believe we are already beaten. But look around you. We have rebuilt the broken. We have turned wrecks into weapons. We have turned despair into fire. And now we will show them that humanity does not bow." His words lit the crowd like sparks in dry grass. Villagers shouted, fists raised. Pilots climbed into their mechs. The valley rumbled as giants rose together. An army born not from factories or generals, but from fields and farms. Each step they took shook the earth. Each breath they drew carried defiance. The mothership answered with fire. Beams of energy cut through the valley. Houses shattered. The ground split open. Trees burned into ash in a single breath. Screams filled the air as people ran for cover. But the mech stepped forward into the storm. Eli's machine staggered under the first blast. Armor peeled. Glass cracked. Alarms screamed. But he pulled the controls hard. The mech raised its shield, sparks flying as light crashed against metal. Through the smoke he saw the weakness others had missed. A glow near the mothership's lower hull. Not a weapon, but a vent. A place where fire escaped. A farmer's eyes had found what soldiers never saw. He shouted across the comms, "Aim for the vent! Bring it down!" Mechs turned their cannons. Their shots roared into the sky. Bolts of fire slammed into the mothership. Its shield shimmered, cracks spreading like veins of light. The aliens screamed in anger. They sent waves of drones, hundreds at once. The sky turned black with their wings. They rained fire on the valley, but humans did not run. They fought like the ground itself belonged to them. Mechs smashed drones with steel fists, tore them apart with blades. Villagers fired from the ground with rifles made from scavenged parts. Every man, every woman, every child stood as if the earth beneath their feet was their last home. Eli's mech pushed forward. He waded through fire. Each step a thunderclap. His cannon tore through the swarm. His shield shattered, but he raised his arm again. He was bleeding inside the cockpit, smoke choking his breath, but still he moved. Suddenly, a blast struck his mech from above. The cockpit shook violently. The screen shattered. The machine staggered and fell to one knee. The villagers cried out in terror. But Eli did not surrender. He gripped the wrench at his belt, slammed it against the broken controls, and the mech roared back to life. The mothership's glow grew brighter. It was charging its main weapon, a blast that could erase the valley in one strike. The ground shook with its power. Tim. He seemed to slow. People screamed, but Eli only whispered, "Not yet." He gathered what strength remained in the machine. He pushed the controls forward. The mech stumbled, then rose step by step. Behind him, the other mechs followed, a broken army charging into fire, their eyes glowing, their cannons roaring. The valley itself seemed to rise with them. Eli's voice cut through the comms, fierce and unshaken. "We are not finished. We are not broken. This is our land, our sky, our fight." The mothership's weapon reached its peak, its core burning with endless light, and Eli charged straight into it, his wrench clinking with every step. The mothership's core burned like a second sun above the valley. Its weapon charged, its glow brighter than the dawn. Every human eye was fixed on it, every heart racing with terror. If it fired, the valley would be erased, the mechs would be dust, and hope would vanish. But Eli's voice still echoed through the comms, steady and unbroken. "Hold your ground. We are not finished." His mech staggered forward, sparks leaping from broken joints. Smoke filled the cockpit, blood dripped down his arm, yet his hands did not let go of the controls. The other pilots saw him and followed, their machines just as battered, just as broken, but their courage grew from his. They marched into fire beside him, cannons roaring, fists swinging, drones swarmed like locusts, tearing through armor, ripping into steel. But the humans did not stop. They were no longer soldiers, no longer villagers, no longer just survivors. They were one storm. Eli's eyes locked on the vent he had seen before, a weakness, small but real, while others saw a wall of fire. He saw a crack in the stone. That was a farmer's gift, to see life in dead soil, to see strength in broken ground. And now he saw victory in the enemy's heart. He shouted across the comms, "All fire on the vent, now." The mechs turned their weapons. Bolts of light roared upward, slamming into the same spot again and again. The mothership's shield shuddered, cracks glowing wider. The alien commanders screamed in disbelief. How could rusted machines, piloted by farmers and children, wound their greatest weapon? The mothership fired. A beam of burning light fell from the sky. The earth split open. Villages vanished. Mountains shook. Eli's mech stood in its path, raising its arms like a wall. The cockpit shook violently. Glass shattered. Alarms wailed. The blast burned through steel, through armor, through bone. But still Eli pushed forward. The other mechs formed around him, shields raised, weapons firing into the storm. The ground shook under their defiance. Together they forced their way through fire, closer and closer to the mothership's vent, until Eli was near enough to see its glow through the smoke. His cannon was gone, his shield destroyed, the mech was falling apart, but his wrench still hung at his side. Eli pulled it free, gripping it tight. One tool, one weapon, one symbol of every broken thing he had ever fixed. And with the last of his strength, he slammed it into the failing controls. The mecha's core overloaded, power surged through its frame. Light bursting from its joints, Eli guided it one final step, then another. Then with a roar like thunder, he drove the machine straight into the vent. A storm of fire erupted. The mothership screamed, its shields collapsing, its hull tearing apart. Flames tore across the sky, shattering the alien beast into burning fragments. Silence followed, a silence so heavy the world seemed to hold its breath. Then cheers erupted from the valley. Villagers cried, pilots shouted, hands lifted into the sky. The mothership was falling, and humanity was rising. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was littered with burning wrecks. The mechs that had fought stood scarred and broken, but they stood, and in the middle of it all, Eli's machine lay in ruins, its cockpit silent, its frame shattered. The villagers gathered around it, tears in their eyes. They whispered his name, Eli. The farmer who refused to kneel, though the man inside did not answer. His spirit filled every voice, every hand that lifted the wounded, every child who dared to smile again. He had taught them something the galaxy would never forget, that victory did not come from power alone. It came from those who refused to give up. It came from ordinary people who chose to fight when the world said surrender. And so the story spread, from villages to cities, from Earth to the stars. Aliens whispered of the farmer with a wrench who broke their empire. Humans spoke his name with pride. Eli, who had changed the war, not with weapons, not with fleets, but with stubborn hands and an unbroken heart. And somewhere, in the silence of the fields he once tended, the wind carried his promise. The battle was lost, until a human farmer walked in with a wrench.